Welcome to the Travelman Podcast. My name is Ben and I host this cool travel podcast. If you're joining me for the first time, then thanks a bunch for listening. On today's awesome episode, I'll be chatting with Ben Bowlin, the co-host of the very popular and well-loved conspiracy theory podcast, Stuff They Don't Want You to Know. I'm super excited to chat to Ben about his travels and his stories about escaping abroad, so sit back and enjoy the conversation I have with Ben. All right, Ben, so I can't believe you're on my podcast, man. Thank you so much. And how is the weather in Hotlanta today?
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Ben. As you know, my longstanding opinion is go Bens in general.
Go Bens.
Yeah, and I enjoy your podcast. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. The weather here is pretty British right now, honestly.
Oh, wow.
Pretty emo. We've got this overcast, kind of not quite rain, but definitely drizzle thing going on. So you and I were talking off the air earlier about how we, it seems like we're both fans of walks. So I'm going to go, after this, I might go take a little evening constitutional, so long as it's not absolutely pouring. But it's cool. It's like I don't know how to say it. It feels like maybe true crime weather. Every time you see a true crime show, there's this kind of weather.
Oh, that's funny you're talking about true crime, because I was listening to an episode that you guys did on Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, and it was on Radio Rental.
Yes.
So I just listened to that yesterday, and I'm up to episode 5 already because I just have that much free time. And and there was there was so many stories that stuck out, but Jesus, I can't believe it. I mean, I can believe it. I know it's real, but it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It's got that, it's got this, I would put it in the category of folklore, and the internet and the way we tell stories digitally has put some real gas in the fire of what we understand about folklore in general. Payne's a great guy. I mean, full disclosure, he and I are pretty good friends, along with Matt, who's worked with him on a number of projects. But Radio Rental, we thought, was really exciting because there is this urban mythology to it, Like the shoe bomber story actually did happen, but there are other stories where you have to wonder, is it something that could be explained through a mundane way, or is it something that maybe the person who told the story originally believed? And I think, as you heard, Payne, one of the biggest difficulties he and his team had was getting people to actually tell their stories on air. So he put a lot of work into it, and I like to think it shows. I'm looking forward to another iteration. I hope they do a season 2.
Yeah, me too. I think I've got a story to tell him as well.
Oh, fantastic. I'll let him know. Yeah.
Yeah, let him know that Travelman has a story for him. Well, no, it's for that show. It would be perfect.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
I'll have to tell you another time. It's a little bit long and drawn out.
You don't want to spoil it before it goes on.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, you are from Stuff They Don't Want You to Know, as I would have said in the introduction that I haven't done yet. And you are also still doing car stuff. You've recommenced car stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct.
2 great shows that I do enjoy listening to. And listener who's listening today should definitely listen to those shows because I love them. Now, I have you on the podcast today to talk about some times that you have said on Stuff They Don't Want You to Know that you've escaped certain countries, or maybe I'm paraphrasing, I don't know. But I remember to an episode that you, Matt, and Noel did on Odessa, the secret Nazi escape route. Now, you mentioned at the start you're throwing out candy there, and you said you had difficulty getting out of a town in Guatemala at dark. So Ben, please let me know what happened, mate. You have to tell me.
Of course. Of course. So at the time, I was living in Guatemala, and I went to I was in a town called Quetzaltenango, or Xela, and it's a fairly large town. It's closer to the Pacific side of the country. Some friends and I went. We took a bus ride on what's called a chicken bus. It's a story in and of itself. They're basically suicide machines. They're like all the outdated Bluebird school buses that are common in a lot of education systems. When they get busted up here in the U.S., instead of being scrapped or sold to hipsters to turn them into like biodiesel vehicles, they are sold at cut rate prices to Mexico, Central American, South American countries. They're decorated in these garish, Mardi Gras-esque kind of patterns. And then,
cool.
Yeah, really cool. And then these crazy guys drive them at breakneck speed around the mountains. Like if you haven't caught air in a school bus, just go visit Guatemala, man. I'm telling you. So we go up to this town that's maybe a little more tourist or expat friendly called Antigua, and or Lago Atitlan, excuse me. And Lago Atitlan is this beautiful place where there's a lake surrounded by volcanoes, essentially. And so people hang out there. They have there are a lot of Germans who retired there because the money just goes so much further in that country. So the problem is, and Guatemala is a beautiful place, but it's far from a perfect place. And my friends that were with me were having a nice time la-di-dying and fiddly-deeing on the shore of this, again, beautiful lake. And it was starting to get dark. And the thing about Guatemala in general, at least at the time when we were there, is that traveling after dark is a no-no. It's not advised, because even people on like the charter buses, those really nice buses you'll see rock stars in, even those buses were getting held up and violently robbed. And if someone appeared to be, there was some distrust of foreigners there. And if someone appeared to be a foreigner from what would be considered a wealthy part of the world, then they could get kidnapped. And as you know, in most kidnapping situations, if you go to a second location, your odds of surviving the situation drastically reduced. So it's not, so long story short, it's not good to travel after dark. It's getting dark, dude. It's getting dark. And I'm telling my people, like, we have to either spend the night here or we have to go now. Because there's not like a train system. It's a very loose network of various kinds of bus transportation or hitching rides and vans and stuff. And so, so we find the last bus going out of town. The problem is it's kind of a long drive, and the last bus going out of town, sure as hell, is not going to take us back to Quetzaltenango. Instead, it takes us to a place in pretty much the forest, the jungle, called Dos Encuentros. Dos Encuentros is literally a crossroads. That's where they drop us off. There's like one struggling sodium yellow street light. There's a half-built cinder block brick building, and they say, you gotta wait here. There's going to be somebody coming in a truck, and you can catch a ride with the person in this truck. And I say, okay, this doesn't sound good. And now all of a sudden, why am I responsible for these other 2 or 3 people with me? And so we wait, and this thing that pulls up, it's a beat up pickup truck, and it's got if you've seen work trucks where you would hold glass and stuff like that, the glass, it's like that. And it's clearly on its last legs. And the guy is about to just drive past us. And so I run out, and I'm running out, and this is the dumbest thing I did while I was in that country. This is the second dumbest thing I did while I was in that country. I ran up, and I had K-Tals, the cash, the currency there, and I was like just waving it. I'm like, I got to flag this guy down. This is the best flag I have. And so he stops. And he speaks Spanish, and he speaks Quiche, which is a Mayan dialect common there. And we're figuring, like, I'm negotiating a price with him, but I can't really push, because if he doesn't let us ride in the back of his pickup truck for a while, then we're SOL, and we're stuck in the jungle in a place where FARC activities are happening. There's separatist groups. It can be a violent place. So anyway, long story short, this guy says yes, and I pay him way too much, but he's the only game in town, right? And so he takes us to another place. This place didn't even have a name, and we were supposed to wait for the last charter bus, the fancy bus that was coming all the way from Guatemala City that was going to go to Quetzaltenango. So waiting for this bus. This is before the era of widespread cell phones. This is before, definitely before you could look up stuff on the internet. We're getting to the point where I'm thinking, I might have to make a fire and teach my friends, who are all women, by the way, who are all like, when I bring up women just because Guatemala has a history of misogynistic violence. So I'm not saying that they would be in any way unprepared for nights sleeping rough, but they're city folks. Yeah, they're city folks, and they're also in a country that has an egregious rate of male on female crime. And so we wait for about 2.5, maybe, if I had to ballpark it, hours. And there are no lights, by the way, I should mention. And so then in the distance, the wild is very loud, but even in a very loud place, you could hear a man-made thing from very far away. So I hear this distant rumble, and I'm thinking, please, God, let this be the bus. Let this be the bus, because otherwise we don't know how long we'll have to wait for a bus to drive by in the morning, and we don't know who we'll meet in the interim. And so this bus comes by, and I realize this bus is not going to stop. And so I run out in front of the bus, and I'm like, if this is how it ends, I'm going out like a hero. And the bus slams on its brakes, and the bus driver is not happy. And
shit.
And I should mention, the bus driver is very upset, because, like I said at the beginning of the story, this is at a time and in a place where a lot of charter buses are told not to stop because it's going to be a setup for a robbery. So luckily, I looked like I was not a member of a separatist group or a bandit faction. And the guy stopped. He's super unhappy, but I don't care. I'm over the moon. I'm like, hey, we saved people. I'm amazing, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting very into myself. And that's when I realized that one of the members of my group that I had just thought I saved has gone off into the woods to use the restroom at literally the worst time, dude. He had 2.5 hours. I'm trying to yell it. I got to the point where I have 1 foot on the ground by the door to the bus, 1 foot on the bus, and I'm holding on to the door, and me and this dude are yelling at each other in Spanish, and I'm turning back to yell out for my friend, because otherwise we're going to leave. And I got to that moment where I thought, no,
that was great. That worked really well in that story.
I thought, I thought, you know what, man? I might have to leave her. And thank goodness she comes running, like pulling up her jeans and stuff. And then, and the weirdest thing, so we made it home. And the weirdest thing about it, man, is there are bathrooms on those buses. Why? Why did she go in the woods?
Why?
I saw her a few years ago, and that was one of my first questions. I'm that petty. So, But yeah,
Oh my
that was
God.
Guatemala. Yeah.
Sounds like a lovely travel destination.
Hey, the
You
rest of
set
the
that
time,
up beautifully.
the rest of the time was pretty great. Yeah, if you haven't been, I would suggest it. I think it would be an adventure because I'm also really curious to hear more about your travels. The only thing I would say
Yeah, that's cool.
about about travel in Guatemala in specific is you're probably, if you're flying in, you're going to land in the capital, Guatemala City, and I would be very, very careful there. There are still areas of that city where law enforcement themselves don't venture. So watch out. Just get out of that city. Yeah. But that's it. That's Guatemala.
Wow. And that's Central America, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just to the south of Mexico. It's bordered. Its northern border is Mexico and Belize, southern border Honduras and El Salvador.
And that's still quite like a developing country.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, it's a problem that we see occurring in a lot of Central and South America. Unfortunately, there's a very, very small percentage of the population that controls the majority of the nation's wealth. So there's a lot of poverty there. There's a lot of subsistence living. But again, once you get out of the city, you're seeing some of the most beautiful sights because it is a mountainous region. You can go on a walk in the jungle or the forest, and you can reach one of those peaks where all of a sudden it gets very foggy, and you think, oh, is it going to rain? And you keep walking. And then you get above the clouds and you realize that you just literally walked through the sky. That's a cool thing to do.
Wow. Yeah, that is cool. So, and it's right near the equator too, isn't it?
Yes.
That's very, very tropical and warm and probably wet at times.
Right.
Muddy. It sounds like it would be an interesting place to go to, Guatemala, but I think I would maybe want to go maybe with a tour guide, someone that could show me around.
Yeah. So one thing that a lot of people do is they'll go to a language school in Guatemala, and that's an affordable. You pick up Spanish, but also you get some social structure, and you get connected with those guides. I would definitely recommend a guide. It's a lot of fun. You can see some ancient ruins from Mesoamerica. You can also, it's so neat to travel to the Pacific coast. And again, once you get in country, it's remarkably inexpensive. But I would also say, yeah, like a lot of other countries in that world, or in that region of the world, you're probably going to have a better time when you have someone who lives in country who can help you out who can help you out because they will also, in addition to helping you avoid scams, they are also going to be helping you find things that you may not have thought to look for. So I think that's invaluable. Even if you go to ideally, even if you go to a developing or a developed country, like just recently, I was in London, and London,
cool.
We all speak the same language, right? In London, and it's a big city, but it's pretty accessible, if gratuitously overpriced. Even in London, it's helpful to have a guide. Someone who knows what to do, where to go, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
There's only so much guidebooks tell you or YouTubers can tell you. I think experiencing the country firsthand, for some people can be a shock, but getting a guide definitely helps. And I especially think getting a guide for places like Africa, certain countries in Africa and certain countries in Central America, just people that lead you away from terrible things that may or could happen to you.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a hugely important point. you know this, but for anybody listening who has considered traveling to a less developed part of the world, or maybe a part that statistically has a higher incidence of any kind of crime, you need a guide, you need a fixer. We sent some folks down.
True.
Yeah, we sent some folks down a few years ago to Johannesburg, South Africa, which is, an incredibly developed place, right? But we're sending two or three people from the States who have never been to the continent of Africa, let alone one of the biggest cities there, right? So we reached out in advance to make sure that they had someone they would meet at the airport, to make sure that they had transportation taken care of for what they were doing there. The vast majority of people traveling are going to have a great time, or at least not a fatal one. But I think it may be a little different for those of us listening in Australia, but for those of us listening maybe in the United States, what we have to admit is a lot of people in the U.S. are not very knowledgeable about the rest of the world on an experiential level, because we only have two countries on the direct borders, really, and then the rest is bordered by some degree of ocean. So it's a very far away place. I mean, I was looking at the statistics recently, and quite a few people in the U.S. don't even have a passport. They're like, I live in Iowa. Why do I need a passport? It doesn't make sense, right? So maybe your experience is a little different. Have you been to Africa?
I haven't yet been to Africa, but I want to go. I was planning maybe to go this year, but I don't think I'll do it, to go and see the Big Five.
Oh,
I don't know which country that is. I forget, but that has all the Big Five. Is it the
yeah, because those are the game animals, right?
Yeah, they're the game animals. Yeah, like the lion, hippopotamus, rhinoceros. Is that an animal? Rhinoceros.
Rhinoceros. Yeah.
Rhinoceros sounds more like a dinosaur.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know which. I would hope that it's more than one country, but
maybe it's a group.
Yeah, maybe it's a group. That would be amazing. I've been looking into possibly going to Morocco maybe sometime in 2020. I just really I want to see. There's so much history there that I would love to encounter. The thing with me is that my girlfriend is my primary non-work travel partner, and and when you take every relationship is its own country, right? And it has its own laws and its own norms. And for me, I always want to be really conscious of the idea that I need to look out for her safety as well. So there are some places in the world where I would feel pretty much just fine going by myself. Yeah. But if I take my girlfriend, then I'm even if there's not a safety concern, she might be bored, or she might say, well, this was a lovely 4 days, but I miss running water. And I can be like, that's a good point, but we're still here for another 10 days. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, your girlfriend's nice. I've got her on my Instagram.
That's right.
I love all her food pics. I always say something.
Yeah.
They just look yummy. You got to tell her to stop putting so many delicious food pictures up.
I told her to stop cooking as well, because I don't want to have to work out more. It's like it's nuts. She's very talented. Now, I don't know about you, man, but I still cook the way that single dudes cook, which is yeah. It means like I have 5 to 6 dishes that I'm really great at cooking, and I just never expected to be in a relationship where it would be like day number 7. And like, I guess I'll make this. I guess I'll make this thing I made Monday. You liked that the first time, so.
Yeah, you're like me, mate. I have about 5-star dishes, and that's about it. And then it's bacon and eggs or a sandwich or stuff like that. I make good sandwiches, actually. I try and replicate Reuben sandwiches because they're the best in America, the Reuben sandwich that I had in New York. Just unbelievable. Talking about food now. But yeah, like, oh my God. In Australia, if someone tries to make you a Reuben sandwich in a cafe, it's like heaps of sauerkraut, not much meat. In America, opposite. Lots of meat, not much sauerkraut. And that's the way I like it.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. Yeah. America is very much, for better or worse, oftentimes for both, it can be a land of excess. So
everything's large.
Everything's large. It's ridiculous. That reminds me on the travel aspect, maybe one of the dumbest things I did when I was traveling, when I was living in Guatemala. They had Quetzaltenango had a McDonald's. It was the first time. It was something like a McDonald's. It was McDonald's-esque. It was the first time that I had seen like armed security guards outside of a McDonald's, and these guys had semi-automatic weapons. Yeah, and that understandably put me off of going there for a few weeks, but. Eventually, I said, I'm gonna go try the fast food. Let's see what it's like, right? Let's see what all the hubbub is about. And I went in, and I ordered just like a burger and fries. And then I said, the American in me came out when they said, "What size do you want your combo?" And I said, "Large," because I had no idea what was going on. And people looked at me as though I had grown a third arm out of the back of my head or something. And then I realized, because it had been so long since I had seen an American large soda, I was like, wow, I'm carrying a tiny barrel around. You know what I mean? No one on earth needs this much, right? And so that was a good lesson. I think it's easy to get your perspective or our understanding of what normal is kind of skewed when we don't have anything else to make a comparison toward.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's so true. But yeah, talking about things that maybe are not that normal, I was just going to quickly mention something about Johannesburg when you were talking about Johannesburg and the airport. Leaving the airport, it's quite notorious that you might get followed back to your apartment or hotel or home. So I think that's if someone's thinking about going to Joburg, be very careful because still violence is so high there.
Yeah, that's another problem too, and that's it's funny because there's a lot of there are a lot of these kind of campfire myths. Going back to our conversation about urban legends, there are a lot of these things that are scary stories, and the problem is that for many people based in the United States, these stories are taken to be 100% fact, right? Like if you go to Russia, something terrible will happen to you. If you go to the wrong country in Southeast Asia, you will never be heard from again and stuff like that. But I think the reason that stuff thrives is because people, again, don't have a real world experience that they can draw on for comparison. And sometimes there's a little bit of truth. Like, yes, there are people who have gone to Southeast Asian countries and have been imprisoned and in some cases have been executed. But the reason that happened is because they were involved with things like human trafficking or the drug trade, right? I just feel like if you were going to a country and they say, nobody's making it a secret law. The countries that have the death penalty for stuff like that, they're very open about it. They're very comfortable telling you before you get on the boat or on the plane. And I just wish that more, I wish that more people in the U.S. were less afraid of traveling internationally. But I also understand, for people living here, it can be a tremendous expense just to get across those oceans, you know?
You don't get the holidays that the rest of the world get too.
That's true. Oh,
you guys get 2 weeks or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, that is very much the case. And then for a lot of people don't even take all of those hours or days of holiday. I know I probably won't this year, for instance. I didn't have time to work it in.
But you seem to travel a lot and getting back to travel stuff.
Yeah.
I know that on the podcast you've also mentioned that you've had issues in Canada and also Germany.
Yeah.
Can you go into this a little bit further? I really am intrigued to know why you do have bad luck going into so many different countries. It's quite funny, actually, Ben.
Well, thank you. It's funny because we're all okay, right?
We're all okay. It wouldn't be funny if something happened to you.
So in the case of Canada, initially I was turned back at the border and did not go through customs. In the case of Germany, me and my travel partner at the time missed our plane. We're unable to board our plane just for very mundane reasons, right? The plane was fine, and the plane ended up leaving. It just didn't have us on it, and we were trying to get moved to a different flight. And we were playing this waiting game. We were stuck kind of in the bureaucratic wheels. And eventually security at the airport came up and took us aside, you know, and very politely asked us what the hell we were doing and what we were planning to do and why have we been, you know, and the guy had some classic line. And of course, you know, the majority of Germans probably tend to speak English better than the majority of people in the U.S. So this guy was, Ben, I'm telling you, this guy was on. He has a future in like a witty sitcom or something because because he said, you know, I'm not going to do an accent. I don't want to be offended.
Go on, try.
But he said essentially. He had a very dry tone, and he said essentially, he was like, "It's like, you know, I don't know how you all do it in America, but most people when they hang out in airports, they do it to get on a plane and go somewhere, and so naturally, we're curious about what you're doing here." And that freaked me out because that was like, whoa. I mean, at the same time, it's kind of flattering, right? I'm like looking at my partner at this time and I'm thinking, wow, we're nailing it. They think we're spies. But obviously they didn't. And, you know, we explained that we screwed up and lost our flight. But I will tell you probably the most hilarious story of what went wrong in Germany traveling. In Germany, this is a little bit personal, but I'm fine to share it. In Germany, I was on a honeymoon with my now ex-wife. Everything's fine. We're still friends, et cetera, et cetera. And cool. as we were traveling, we went through Berlin and a couple of other places in the area. And again, this being before we had things like brilliant language learning apps on cell phones and so on. I had been picking up, you know, print publications, and I had been teaching myself the basic language or the basic words everyone should know when you enter another country. Stuff like please, thank you, where is blah, 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 you know, that kind of stuff. Excuse me, sorry, etc. And I knew that I would not be able to, surprise, surprise, master the German language in 3 weeks or whatever. So I just said, okay, I'm going to learn some things. And then I learned a phrase. I said, okay, if it gets too hype, if things are progressing too quickly, I am going to whip out this phrase and I'll apologize to the person. I'll say, I'm sorry, my German's not good enough for this conversation. May we continue in English? So I think it's going to work. So me and the person I'm traveling with, she and I get out. It's Berlin. It's amazing. Walking around, and then the first time this happens, some guy comes up to me, and it's just a stranger walking on the street, and he says something to me in German. And I to my credit, Ben, I try to keep up for like maybe 15, 20 seconds. And I'm thinking, okay, this guy thinks I do speak German, and I definitely do not. So I deploy my line and I say, I'm sorry, my German's not good enough for this conversation. Can we continue in English? And the dude kind of freezes up. And he looks me up and down. His eyes flit down to my feet, then back up at me. And then he says in a dead voice, he goes, "Fine. Where is the train?" And I say, "Oh," and I say, "Okay, it's like a block down that way and take a ride. I think that's the station. That's where we just got off." And then he just leaves. He doesn't say thank you or anything else. And I'm looking at the person I'm traveling with, and I think, wow, are the stereotypes about German people true? I always thought it was just kind of racist. What if they're all kind of like cold, abrasive robot people? And she said, yeah, I don't know. So fast forward, we're there for like more than a week, and people are lovely in general, right? And every so often I have this conversation where, because I look like I have European heritage somewhere in the back there. I look like I could be plausibly German. And people are coming up to me, and if they are speaking a lot of German or they're speaking as though I'm a native speaker, then I'm deploying this line. I'm saying, I'm sorry, my German is not good enough for this conversation. Can we continue in English? And every time that happens, they do continue in English because, again, people from Germany speak fantastic English, and they're all kind of, it's like they're a different personality in English, and I'm fascinated by this. Fast forward, the night or like the day before we are leaving or flying back to London and then from there to the U.S., we're staying in a hostel because we're delightfully, romantically very, very broke. And so, I'm walking into our hostel, which is a pretty nice place. And then, there's this girl about my age kind of walking out, and then she says something to me, like really like kind of the version of excuse me. And then there's a lot of German that I totally don't understand. And so I say, I'm sorry, my German's not good enough. Can we continue this conversation in English? And that's when she stops and her brow furrows, and she says to me in a clear American accent, "You're a dick." And then she walks by, and the lady at the counter, and it's right next to this counter, right at the front door, lady at the counter starts like kind of chuckling to herself, like a kind of thing. And I say, "Wait, what's going on? Wait, what's going?" And she goes, "What do you think you've been saying to people?" And that's when I say, I've been saying, "I'm sorry, my German's not good enough. Can we continue this conversation in English?" And she goes, no. What you've been saying is, I'm sorry, your German is not good enough. Can we continue in English? And you've been saying it with the worst worst American accent I've ever heard. And I'm dumbfounded. And, the person I'm with at the time comes down to the hostel, like to the lobby, and I'm saying, "Hey, did you know about this?" And then she starts laughing, and she's like, "Yeah, I've known the whole time. It's hilarious."
Oh, jeez.
I know, man.
Oh, you've been telling people they're Germans, crap house.
Yeah.
I love it. That is so good, Ben.
I lucked out, and I wish, for everybody in the Travelman family who's listening from Germany, I just have to say I am so, so very sorry. I've gotten a lot better at double checking myself, and I pay particular attention to the pronouns. So.
Oh, God. So you were in Berlin, yeah?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it? Berlin's awesome.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, the amount of art and the amount of history there is just maddening. Anytime I've been in a European city, I am astounded by how how true that old cliche or figure of speech is. You know, they say in America, 200 years is a long time, and in Europe, 200 miles is a long way. And it's so true to, you know, like you'll walk into a building and it'll be from the 1500s. It's fascinating. Also, it's so, I'll tell you the one thing that got me. We were in Kreuzberg, I believe. The one thing that got me was that people can drink on the streets, and that was surprising to me, because that's not outside of a town like New Orleans here in the U.S. That's not very common. It's sort of understood that like there are ordinances and laws against it, you know?
Sure. I mean, just like Australia, there'd be nowhere you can step out on the street and have a beer. You can drink in like designated areas where there are tables that are on the pavement. But then you just got to be careful, obviously, with the alcohol that you consume. But we're pretty relaxed here in Melbourne, I guess. So if you're ever in Melbourne, mate, we'll have a beer together.
I would absolutely love to. It's one of my big dream trips, actually, because I am fascinated with the unique flora and fauna of Australia, and we have just through the different podcasts we've done, like car stuff they want you to know, ridiculous history. I've been able to meet a lot of really cool people from Australia, such as yourself, Ben, and hang out, even if it's only digitally. So I would love to make that a real thing, and go, you know, of course, assuming I can get into the country, I would love to have a grand old time. It's also I love road trips. And there seems to be a lot of great road trip opportunities in Australia.
Take a road trip to Pine Gap. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That goes into travel conspiracies, huh?
Oh, yeah. We'll be talking about that in a second. I was going to say, is there anywhere else in the world that you've had to escape, or you've had to leave quite abruptly, or felt threatened?
Well, yeah, of course, but not in maybe not in an entire country way, or not in a way that I should really talk about. But I think everybody's been in a situation, you know, where it feels like there's something ill in the wind, or you're getting a strange vibe. And
scary.
Yeah. And what science shows is that you really should listen to your gut and your intuition in any situation like that. No, I'm not alleging, of course, I'm not saying that people have provable psychic powers or something, but I am saying that science shows our bodies and our minds are very, very good at picking up and assembling clues without telling the conscious side of our brain. So when you have a bad feeling about something, it's typically going to be because behind the scenes, your mind and your body have assimilated a ton of different clues, maybe even stuff you wouldn't notice, like body language, positioning, you know, small smells, very little things. That's you trying to save your own life. So listen to your gut. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? People will be like, why did they run out of that, suddenly drop their hot dog and run out of that gas station? That's fine. Now you just have an awkward moment. You go back, you pay for the hot dog. That's a terrible example, but you see what
I think that's happened to me maybe once when I forgot to pay for something. I was like, oh, crap. Sorry. Oops. I didn't mean it. I'm not a thief. I'm not here to thief you, person.
Right. You have to have that conversation where you're like, look, I'm a very good person. I'm just kind of absent-minded, or, you know, I was thinking about something really cool. I say just lean into the awkwardness, man. That's, you know, if you can't be perfect, be endearing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Hey, in regards to, you know, having that feeling in your stomach and just sensing something, that's exactly the story that I want to share on Payne's podcast. It is so it's creepy. It's creepy. I've written it down as a story, so it's about 3 or 4 pages. I don't know how long people talk for. I think they talk for about half an hour, don't they? His guests.
I would imagine, and candidly, there's probably some stuff that comes out in the edit, but I would, I am confident in saying that, like Matt or myself or Payne, good producers and good storytellers want the runtime or the duration to be something that serves the story. Like nothing is worse than being in a situation where you say, okay, we have a show that needs to be 25 minutes or 40 minutes, and it has to be one of those. So we're either going to stretch a really short story out to 25 minutes, or we're going to cut off an amazing 45-minute story at the last 5 minutes. That stuff happens. Mostly people have learned not to do that, but it still happens sometimes.
Well, I know with my podcast, I just let the person talk until they're pretty much half dead, and then I go, right, that's the end of the podcast.
I heard your radio voice pop in there. Nice.
Thank you, sir. My oldie radio voice. Now, do you like that? Now, you've been to South Korea and Japan in recent travels. You were nearly in South Korea at the same time as me.
Is that true? And yes, I love the voice. Yeah.
Yes, you were.
Where did you all go?
We went to just Seoul, and then I did a cool ghost tour in Seoul, which was so cool because I'm a dude that loves his ghost tours, and obviously did a food tour. Just went to the old, I don't know any of the names because I'm really bad with Korean, but those old castles.
Oh,
the main one.
Up
the main strip.
Mm-hmm.
I was there at the Lantern Festival. Were you there at that time?
Let's see. We were there, probably be August or February.
It was last year. Where was it? No, it was 2 years ago for me.
Oh, okay.
It was like at the end of or the middle of 2018 when I was there.
Okay.
But I do remember seeing photos you put up.
Oh, okay. Then we were there. I'm just very bad at the organization.
Same.
Yeah, we went. So the first time I was in Seoul, it was August, and we learned very quickly that despite how far north South Korea looks on a map, it's no joke. When it's summer, it is summer there, and it's crazy hot. I think living in the south of the United States for a while has kind of ruined my perception of my understanding that a lot of other parts of the world do have very distinct and very extreme seasons. They have 4 of them. You notice them. Atlanta's weather is very lazy. It kind of, saunters. Like spring just sort of becomes a little hotter, and then summer just sort of like saunters lazily into fall, and then fall is just sort of like someone in a bed rolling over to winter, and nothing really changes. You know what I mean? And sometimes it rains. But in a place like Seoul, which I'm sure you all encountered as well, it feels like a world apart to go to. Feels like a world apart to travel there in winter versus traveling in summer. And speaking of a world apart, though, I'm very curious. Did you ever try to get to the other side of the border, to the DPRK?
You know what? Funny you asked me that question because we booked, Mandy, my wife and I, we booked a tour to get to the DPRK, and they cancelled.
Yeah, that's the problem.
They gave a reason, but yeah, whatever.
Well,
yeah.
that's that's the main reason I keep returning to South Korea, to the Republic of Korea, is to try to get into North Korea, which I'm sure you already know about. My girlfriend hates that. She thinks it's a terrible hobby. She wants to go shopping at the gigantic mall, which is fine. She does her thing for a few days. I do my thing. But I can give you a little insight on why that was canceled and why that stuff tends to be canceled so quickly.
Sure.
It's because literally the up until the morning of, because you guys probably had something that like you maybe get in a bus and drive north.
Yes.
So literally up until like 10 or 15 minutes before people are on the bus, even when people are already on the bus, any number of stakeholders can, for any reason, cancel that kind of tour. Those stakeholders aren't just the Republic of Korea and the DPRK. There are agencies within the DPRK, agencies within the Republic of Korea. Each of them can pull a veto. The United States can pull a veto. There are like more people at play. And so we have to kind of wait for a perfect storm where none of those people have a bad day. Also, they don't really have to provide a reason. They can give you a reason if they want to, but they can also just say it's canceled. And that's what kept happening to me. I'm hoping it doesn't happen. Of course, I'm hoping for peace between the two countries primarily, but I'm hoping one day they'll all inexplicably be in a good mood, and I can finally get over there, because it's a unique country. It's one that I studied. I studied in grad school during previous U.S. administrations, when there was even greater concern about nuclear proliferation. It's one of those countries that also poses a real moral dilemma. So let's say that you and I decide we're going to go on the only like long-term in-country tour of the DPRK that we can take. That means you and I get on the North Korean airline out of China, and which is famous, by the way, for having
Cairo, Kiro or something.
I believe you're right. That by the way is famous for having the worst airline food in the world. I don't know how much of that is propaganda, but we would find out. And so when we land there, though, the problem is, just like visiting Myanmar or something, every piece of currency we spend is going to support the authoritarian regime, So we have to ask ourselves, are we truly helping people by doing this? Are we helping the people who live there, or are we furthering their oppression? And honestly, man, that's an answer that I still quarrel with. I don't know where I fall on some of those lines. And it's kind of like, when you and I were talking about visiting a country that has the big five, depending on which country that is, we have to ask ourselves again, are we helping local people, local businesses, or are we just aiding and abetting the crimes of the people who currently run the government? And make no mistake, in the DPRK, the dollars spent are going directly to the ruling party. Now, whether the country is actually ruled by Kim Jong-un or whether it's ruled by a consortium of the military cadre, that's up for guesses, right? Because neither of us are in there. But I don't know. I still want to go. This is something that you and a lot of folks listening today can probably understand. I've always wanted to go to the places where people, for some reason or another, are not quote unquote allowed. Like another dream country would be Bhutan, which is the only country that rates its success in terms of like gross national happiness. So that would be an interesting place to go. Yeah. But it's prohibitive. They only give out a certain number of visas per year, I think. And they also, they have a pretty high like per day rate that you have to pay as a tourist. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. I don't think I think it's one of those things where they don't so much absolutely need the funds. It's more that they want to discourage a glut of tourists, and it works pretty well.
You mentioned something about places that you can't visit or you want to visit but will be hard to visit.
Yeah.
I've got a book here which I wanted to share with you. It's called 100 Places You Will Never Visit, The World's Most Secret Locations, and it's by this guy called Daniel Smith. But it's really interesting.
I am 1,000,000% in. I'm going to get a copy. I have not read this. The World's Most Secret Locations. So does that include stuff like black sites? Does that include stuff like like nuclear fallout sites?
I'll tell you now. So there's a list of, looks like maybe 15. So one's the wreck of submarine K-129, the Skunk Works, the U.S.-Mexico drug smuggling tunnels, Vatican secret archives, Air Force One, Oak Island money pit, M15 headquarters, Swiss Fort Knox, Svalbard global seed vault, Chernobyl exclusion zone, which actually would be interesting to visit, transmitter UVB-76, Hainan submarine base, Mossad headquarters, Tora Bora caves, Isa Grand Shrine, Grand Shrine, and Snake Island. So yeah, they're all listed in here with details and so forth. They're very interesting.
Yeah, I am going to buy this book post haste. Thank you for recommending it to me. I'd also like to, of course, recommend a similar book that's maybe a little less dangerous. One of my favorite books of all time is Judith Shlansky's
Atlas of Remote Islands?
Yes, sir. You got
I've got it right here, sir. I bought the book after listening to your episode.
Well, I have to ask candidly, does it measure up to the hype? Was it worth checking out?
It's an amazing book. It is so well written. It's actually a beautiful book just to flick through and look at the pictures and look at the writing. I was just reading a little bit before we went on air today. No, it's fantastic. Everyone should own The Atlas of Remote Islands by Judith Shlansky. And this is the book podcast with Ben and Ben.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. Seriously though, I am so interested in those sorts of places. The book by Smith you've recommended, The World's Most Secret Locations. I'm going to follow up with you after I read it because one thing that's interesting for you and I in our respective locations in the world is that there are some places where it is easier for you as an Australian passport holder to travel than it is for me as a U.S. passport holder. For instance, right now, I don't know how it's working with the Australian government, but right now I'm going to have to put Tehran on the back burner. Now Tehran is to the point where, and I have people I speak with regularly who live in Iran, and of course they're very worried, they're very concerned. Who wouldn't be? And now, this is one of the only times in my traveling experience where things, instability or the threat thereof, got to the point where I'm the one who said, I don't know, maybe we should wait for a second and just see how this shakes out. Which is, I've always wanted to go there because it is a seat of such learning. But I still, just to follow up on places I probably can't currently travel now. A lot of the stands are out for me. When I say the stands, I mean like Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, etc. And that, to be completely candid, is because My family has a military background or counterintelligence background, such that now I'm not a big deal. Don't get me wrong, Ben. I do not have a shred of relevance other than something that could be mistaken as a potential bargaining chip if I go to a place with the wrong regime during the wrong like time in their geopolitical bromances or whatever. So there are countries, the way it works, or I'd say the problem here, the potential problem is that there are countries, some in the stands, that would be more than happy to allow someone like me in, but things could be less simple or more complicated when it comes to allowing me out. So I have to navigate that stuff carefully. But that's the answer there. I'm going to buy The World's Most Secret Locations by Daniel Smith, and then we're going to go back and do a second episode of the Ben and Ben Book Club, which I'm very on board with, by the way.
Okay. Well, we definitely do a second episode, us talking about books and secret or crazy conspiracy type books. But yeah, it's called 100 Places You Will Never Visit, and then subtitle The World's Most Secret Locations by Daniel Smith. So look for 100 places you will never visit. Talking about places that you will never visit, let's get talking about some travel conspiracies, Ben.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you got any? I have one, but it's not much of a conspiracy.
I have a few. How about this? How about we trade some off? I'll start with just a couple rapid fire ones that should be familiar. There's that conspiracy trope of a town in Germany that doesn't exist. What is it? Bleefeld, Germany, or something?
Wow, don't know it.
Oh, so let me make sure I'm spelling that right. So this is a running joke in Germany that there is a town that does not exist. It's Bielefeld, Bielefeld. Bielefeld. Again, my German, of course, it's well established as horrible. So this town is this conspiracy around this town is kind of a satirical tongue-in-cheek thing where people claim that the city does not exist, but it's an illusion that's somehow been made up by various forces at play for some shadowy, ulterior motive. It got so popular that Angela Merkel made a reference to it. There was some line where she's like, "And the town of Bielefeld, Germany, if it exists." So I thought that was funny. There are a couple I've heard that I don't believe, but before I toss it to you, let me give you one I do believe. I do believe, because it is proven, that airlines, especially in the West, have been slowly and purposefully reducing the amount of seat you get on a plane ticket, like the back of that seat in front of you. If you'll notice, it's getting closer and closer and closer, and the quarters are getting tighter and tighter and tighter. But it's strange because it doesn't seem like that's happening in a way that gives them a ton more space. I think what they're doing is they're turning the screws a little bit so that the seats that used to be the normal coach seat are now their economy plus or something, because they have the old version of leg space and they're being sold at a premium. That's what I think is happening. I think there's a very slow, the old cliche about frogs and water slowly coming to a boil. That's what they're doing. But those are two. I have some that are crazy, but I'd like to hear from you. What's the one you got?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the seats. Have you seen the standing seats?
Yes. Is that a real thing?
Well, it's a real concept. I think they were wanting to implement it, but I don't know how you could. Personally, there's no way that – I'm guessing that little seat wouldn't be able to hold you up for the whole flight. That's what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to think how that would be comfortable. But look, it's a way to fit in more people, just as, like you said, by shrinking seats, the width, the height, everything,
Yeah, but how would you – so here's my question. They must have tied some sort of time metric to it. They must have said – this seat will work for a flight that's, like 2 hours or less or something like that. Because no one's going to –
maybe.
Well, no one's going to take God, I hope no one has to take a flight from, Melbourne or something to, let's say, San Francisco on one of those seats. You'd go crazy. You might have medical problems at the end.
Yeah, well, it's definitely seats are only for certain people. You couldn't have someone that's disabled sitting in one of those seats. But yeah, I think you're right. As in the time frame, it would have to be a short flight. But just imagine that, people standing up. That's just weird. It's not right. And it's just a way that, that they can fit more people in the plane.
Yeah.
Make more money.
Yeah, but then also, I guess we have to say, I think you make an excellent point about people who are not able to stand for long periods. Those seats are not going to work for them. But let's also think of safety in general. What happens? What happens when that big steel bird hits the water or something? People who are standing in those seats, especially, like, think about it. Now, this is probably I want to keep it PG-13 here for Travelman, but I'm just gonna establish this. Look up a picture of the seat. Look where the seat rests, and then imagine if there's a jolt there while you're standing. That is an unpleasant experience, I would imagine.
Oh my God, it would be terrible. Yeah. But I just can't believe that they're thinking about it and that they would pursue that concept. It's just ridiculous. Yeah, all right, you're going to get more people in a plane. I don't know if the seats will be any cheaper, but it definitely should never happen.
Yeah. So for we'll tell you one of the things that's still kind of considered a conspiracy in the world of travel. I haven't done an episode on this yet. I haven't dug into the nitty gritty the way that I usually would. But because
you're waiting for me, buddy.
I'm waiting for you. Yeah. Let's do it. The one of the biggest objections to what we call the passport system today is the idea that it's less about its purported goals of safety for people traveling and safety and sovereignty for countries, and it's simply a way to stop the disadvantaged across the globe from entering into the life and the realms and the culture of the advantaged or the haves. The idea then is that a passport system functions like the way like the British Empire was very open about it, and still the British law is very open about it. There are overseas British possessions where people are considered, a citizen, but they don't have something called the right of residency. That's something I think a lot of U.S. people would be unfamiliar with, because over here, the path to residency and citizenship are the same thing, and you can be a long-term resident without being a citizen. So it's strange that the reverse of that exists, and that someone could be a citizen somewhere and not have the right to reside in that country. The idea that the passport system comes from such a colonialist and troubling place, while I haven't proven it yet, and I haven't done the research. And of course, I'm the kind of person who is glad to be wrong, as long as it means I'm learning what the truth is. The problem with it, the scary thing about it, is it's not implausible. We have to remember that a lot of things that are looked at as very good and very beneficial nowadays do have these insidious, troubling, unclean past. Like, just a off the top of my head example or comparison, the study of gynecology comes from a monster, a slave owner who would vivisect people that he had enslaved. And now the science, the discipline of gynecology saves millions of lives every year around the world. But we would be remiss if we forgot that it had these evil origins. And so I'm interested to see if that's what passports are all about. I mean, it's strange, right? Because nations across the world are hilarious. Anybody who studied geopolitics can tell you that nations never agree on anything, right? The world is a house party. Every nation is a person attending the house party. They all thought there was going to be more beer than there actually is. They all thought their favorite snacks were going to be there, but they're having problems sharing their snacks. And it's strange then that out of all the things, these there's 190 plus recognized UN recognized countries. Out of all the stuff they disagree with, the one thing they got behind is saying, let's make everybody carry a little book and we're going to stamp it when they go places. And then we're going to decide, it's totally up to us. We're going to decide who gets in and why. Now, of course, that is the right of a state actor, but it's also, it's used for very evil purposes. And it's used for like we see racist policies in the U.S. all the time, historically, where they say, okay, current administration aside, I don't want to get too political. This is just a fact. Current administration aside, the United States has historically touted itself as, quote unquote, a land of immigrants, right? But those immigrants don't really have a fair shot at getting a passport, at getting some kind of legal documentation of residency, because the game is rigged for and against people from certain parts of the world. Now, again, I'm a little, again, this is the explicit right of these state actors. They can make those decisions. If someone if a government in the Middle East says, we are not going to allow citizens of Israel to enter our country, then technically they are allowed to do that. They can rationalize that any way they want, just the same way that the U.S. has been putting Iranian Americans, like people who are American citizens, right, and have Iranian ancestry or Iranian relations. Those people have been put through the ringer now, and they're automatically detained trying to get into the country. In some cases, this is ridiculous. In some cases, they went to Canada and then they tried to come back to the U.S. They didn't go to Tehran. They weren't traveling across the world. They probably went to like a Tim Hortons or whatever the popular coffee place is. Maybe got some maple syrup. I don't know. But yeah, I'm being long-winded and I apologize for that. But I think there is maybe a dark origin story to the passport. That's a conspiracy theory. Also, let's see. I think it's hypocritical that people claiming they are fighting for the environment do so in fundraisers and meetings where they have traveled via private jet. It just doesn't measure up.
Greta Thunberg.
Well, the argument there would be, and I have nothing against, I'm thinking kind of the performative concern that we see from a lot of politicians, but Greta Thunberg, while I have nothing against her, I think that the rationale she used was something like, this is the most efficient way to travel. I can't remember, but yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But it's tough to say, it's tough to take that kind of stance. Other travel conspiracies. That town in Germany doesn't exist. We got there. Standing seats are evil. You and I got there. Passports have a weird origin.
Also with passports, sorry to cut you off, Ben, it's a way also to control people as well. And, they obviously look through our passports when we're at passport control, and you don't know if they're just making sure that we haven't gone to a certain country that they don't like, or they're writing stuff down. You never know why we need to keep documentation of stamps and so forth in a passport. So you don't know what's going on.
That's absolutely true. It's strange because it goes into the concept of privacy, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like for anybody who, if you use social media or you have a smartphone, then of course you're giving away pieces of your privacy. And just putting aside that fallacious argument that you have nothing to worry about if you're quote unquote not doing anything wrong. Think about this. I find some people motivated to advocate for their own privacy a little more efficiently when they think about the following thing, which is absolutely true. Yes, these companies, in many cases, these companies, with the cooperation of state actors, they are taking your data and they are selling it. They're selling it for a profit. If you don't have a problem with that, remember, they're making money and you're not getting a cut. Even if it's just a little bit, it's the principle of the thing. If you get $15 a year as a piece of someone at all times, like knowing which countries you have traveled to, that should be your $15, right? I think people should get more cheap and be more concerned if that's what it takes to motivate folks for their privacy.
Oh, awesome. I'll just tell you the one conspiracy theory, and then I'll wrap up with some final questions. Some people don't believe that Australia is real. Yeah, I know. It's bloody stupid.
That's okay. Just to unpack this with you real quick. Is it a satirical thing, like the people who say that Germantown's not real, or are there people who genuinely, for one reason or another, do not believe the continent of Australia exists?
People genuinely do not believe that the continent of Australia exists, and they are from places like England and the US.
Oh God, of course they are. Yeah. Okay. I hate to sound so unsurprised and disappointed. Are these like flat Earth people?
Probably, because anyone knows if you do travel in a plane, you can see the curvature of the Earth, and it's just such a load of crap. Flat Earth.
And that's got to be frustrating. I think what's weird is those sorts of conspiracy theories made more sense when people were doing their best, like in the age of sail and exploration, when people were working off of outdated paper maps. Then you could find a small island or atoll that had sank or that had risen and was either not on the map or wasn't where it was supposed to be or wasn't what was no longer visible physically. But the idea that an entire continent doesn't exist, and I'm hitting that part because it's a continent as well as a country.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Yeah, the idea that an entire continent somehow does not exist is I think it's like willfully contrarian. I think they're trying to be edgy. So when you look at conspiracy theories and you look at them objectively, the first things you want to find are the contradicting claims. In these people's case, the idea that Australia doesn't exist. In your case, my case, and everybody else's case, the fact that Australia does exist. So you look at those things and then you say, okay, so this controversial claim, what would be the motivation? Who would be the actors involved, right? And in this case, it just breaks down quickly. It feels like they're purposely trying to be edgy and not very well. I got to tell you, man, that's not a widespread theory here, at least not in my circle. So I hope that makes it a little less offensive. I don't know.
Yeah, it does. Now, I'll ask you the final questions that I ask every guest. So question one, you can just do quick fire, Ben. If you could travel anywhere in the world now, where would you like to be?
Bhutan. Yeah, Bhutan. I want to check it out.
Bhutan. Oh my God. Cool. And what would you be eating or drinking right now if you had any opportunity? It doesn't have to be anything from Bhutan.
Oh, great. In that case, I would, so sinful answers. Sinful answers, I would probably want to grab seafood or maybe an ortolan, or maybe there's this cheese in Sardinia I always wanted to try. It's called casu merzu. It's illegal because they use maggots to make the cheese. I don't know. I don't think it'll taste good, but I want to. Yeah, I know. What is life if not to be lived, Ben? So I'd be eating and drinking the strangest things I could find, basically.
Very, very good. And what's your favorite country and city?
It changes because I want to say it's someplace I've been to. Right now,
that's all right.
Right now, one of my favorite cities in the world is probably Chicago or San Francisco, even though they're U.S. based. One of my favorite countries in the world right now, just restricting to ones I've been to, is honestly probably Korea. It was amazing. And I didn't drop the ball as hard as I did on that time in Germany. So I feel like I'm still kind of welcome there. That might change,
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Korea is a great place. And what country or city or both have surprised you the most?
I think as in terms of aggregate surprises, I think Japan surprised me immensely because there were a bunch of small things that you don't really think about until you're on the ground. One of the weirdest things I noticed, for instance, and this is neither a bad nor a good surprise, one of the weirdest things I noticed was that in Tokyo and in most of Japan that I saw, everything was very, very clean. The streets were very, very clean. If you've been to a place like New York or something, you know that a lot of big cities tend to be filthy, amazing, but filthy. And Japan not only was very clean, but I would see people walking by and picking up trash. I don't know if it was their trash or what, but I thought that was amazing. And then I realized, I had like an empty coffee cup, and I realized I didn't see a trash can anywhere. I still don't know where the trash in Japan is going, Ben. I don't know what they're doing with it. But that surprised me.
They're ingenious people. I'm sure they know how to get rid of trash without actually showing you. Unbelievable. Hey, Ben, I've really enjoyed today's episode.
Hey, likewise, Ben. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to hearing more, and I look forward to following up with you after I have read The World's Most Secret Locations.
Exactly, Ben. And is there any way that if people want to follow you, they can follow you? What's the best way?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me directly on Instagram, where I am in a burst of creativity, calling myself at Ben Bowlin. You can also follow me on Twitter, where I'm at Ben Bowlin HSW. You can find any of the many shows I do with my various motley crews of producers and co-hosts by searching just Ben Bowlin Podcast, stuff they don't want you to know, ridiculous history, car stuff, etc., etc., etc. You can also write to me directly if email is more your bag, at Ben Bowlin at iHeartRadio.com.
Cool. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on all podcast apps, Spotify, iHeart as well, believe it or not.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I'm Travelman Podcast at Twitter. Is that right? At Twitter, yes. And I'm Travelman Podcast Instagram. Just look up Travelman Podcast and you will find me, dear listener. And dear Ben, I bid you adieu.
Adieu and
adieu.
Adieu. Au revoir.
Au revoir, sir. au revoir. I'm just going to click stop recording, and it should just hang around for 1 second and just let it do its thing, and then it will be all good. But once I press stop recording, we'll still be live. Okay, we're recording right now. You can hear me all good still?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. That's what I appreciate. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll lead you from away from not travel, douche.
Hey, Ben, could you repeat that? Sorry, for some reason it cut out just for a sec.
Douche. Yeah, that's cool, dude. I said I'd probably rather have a tour guide that would take me around Guatemala than me go by myself or with my wife.
I'm sorry, my English is not good enough for this conversation. Can we continue in English? Hang on, sorry, let me go back and edit that. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's say you and I decide we're going to go to the only legal long-term tour.
Sorry, Ben, you just cut out for a second there.
Okay.
Can you just repeat that?
Sure.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
I guess make your legs not wait, what am I trying to say?
Oh, real quick, Ben, off the mic. I've got a few more minutes, but I might need to start wrapping up.
Yeah, no worries, mate. No worries. I might ask you some final questions in a second.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.